Oh my goodness, what day is it today? Happy Friday. Happy Friday, everybody. We're going to have some fun today. We are going to make something that is French and Japanese and kind of sort of Halloweenish and Christmassy all at the same time. Okay, so let's get going. We have got a lot to do today. We are making a gingerbread souffle cheesecake. It's a thing. Well, it is now. Okay, so let's get going here. Now, this is made with no flour of any kind. So, I mean, we don't ever use wheat flour here, but it also has no almond flour and no coconut flour. Okay, so first thing we are going to do is we are going to add 60 grams of mozzarella cheese into our bowl. Now I have this, I'm going to show you guys what we're doing. I'll get you right here into the kitchen with me. Okay, so this is a hot water bath. Now let's give you a little bit better look at that. Okay, so we've just added 60 grams of grated mozzarella cheese. Yes, I do remember that I said cheesecake, and I remember that I just said mozzarella cheese. Now to this we are adding 20 grams of grated cheddar cheese. Now this is a mild cheddar, and we're using a cheddar because it has a little bit higher fat content, and we're using mild because it has a much more gentle flavor profile. Now we are going to stir this over. We're going to turn this hot water bath up a little bit to about a 3, and we're going to let this melt a little bit. And it is already starting. Okay, now to this we are going to add 1 full block, 250 grams of cream cheese. Now you can use whatever brand you like. I'm using a name brand today, but it doesn't matter. You can use a generic one. The only thing is you really do need to make sure that you're using a full fat cream cheese. A full fat anything. Do you have low fat stuff in your house? Don't have low fat stuff in your house. Low fat stuff is not good for you. Do you know how they manage to get rid of the fat and not sacrifice the flavor? By increasing the sugar. I promise you it's true. Okay, now while this is in here and it is melting, we're going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of pink salt. Redmond's real salt is the one that we use almost exclusively. Every now and again I have a reason to use something that okay, I really need to have a cloth here to hang on to this. Now we are going to add our butter to this, and this is 70 grams of salted butter. Now I know all of the recipes that you look for always say unsalted butter. I rarely ever buy unsalted butter. I like salted butter, and I don't have a problem with the way it affects most recipes. Every now and again I come across a recipe that needs to have unsalted butter, but mostly I just use salted butter, and salted butter works really well in here. Okay, so shall we recap? So far we have 250 grams of cream cheese, we have 60 grams of grated mozzarella, full fat mozzarella, and we have 20 grams of grated medium cheddar. Cheddar is something that we always have in our house, but we have 2 different kinds because I like the older, extra old, and Dell likes the medium. Okay, now you can start to see already that this is getting creamy and starting to come together. So we're going to let this keep going and melt a little bit more. You don't want to add too many things at the same time. Now, did you notice that I had this plastic container partly sitting up on my burner? But this does not get hot because it is magnetic induction. Okay, so we're just going to leave that there doing its thing for right now. And we have something else very important that needs to be done before we get to the end. Now, we need to grease our cake pan, and we also need to grease our parchment paper. Now, you want a piece of parchment paper that's going to go all the way around the cake pan and overlap, and it needs to be 4 inches tall ish, thereabouts. Okay, now first thing we are going to do, this all needs to be greased. So the very first thing we're going to do is we are going to grease the cake pan. Okay, this is messy, but it isn't hard, and we're going to use almost all of this butter. Let's set this down here where we can reach it. Now, greasing, we're going to, not only are we going to grease the cake pan, we are also going to grease the parchment paper that goes in here. It's going to help it hold its form. Pardon me. And it's going to help it not stick to anything that it shouldn't stick to. So we don't have to grease the outside of the parchment paper because we have the inside of the pan greased. So we'll set this aside for just a second. And now you want to make sure whatever edge you have cut, it's going to be kind of weebly. We want to grease the other edge. It doesn't need to be all the way to the top, but you do want the straight edge from what you're doing to be on the bottom of the cake pan, because if it isn't, you're going to have a hard time getting this to sit properly. So make sure that you get the edge that is uncut, the straight edge from the package. Okay. Now you can see this is a little bit messy. Do you have kids helping you in the kitchen? Because this is an awesome job for the kids. Gives them something to do. Lets them make a mess on purpose and not get in trouble for it. How often does that happen? Okay, so once we get this done, we're going to add this. Now you want to go all the way to the edge with this because we want this, once we put it in the pan, we want it to stick together. Now I'm going to bring this pan back here and show you. Now we are going to put the side in first. Of course, this is just going to get difficult on me right now. Okay. Okay, this does not usually happen, but I guess every now and again you need to have something to give you a little bit of excitement. Okay, now you can see that we are getting this in the pan. Now we're putting the sides in first, and we're doing that because once you add the bottom piece, and I know I'm crinkling in your ear, aren't I? Once you add the bottom piece to this, you want it to come up the sides of. Okay, this is just going to be difficult here. Just give me 1 second. Let me get this down in here the way it's supposed to be. There we go. There, just like we did it on purpose. Okay, now we have that done. So we'll set that aside, and we are going to grease the top of the round that's for our bottom. Now we don't need to grease both sides because we already have the I say that and then I end up greasing both sides anyway. We already have the cake pan greased, so that's going to be all we need for the bottom of the parchment paper. Okay, now let's put this in here, and we are going to push the edges of this, well, in theory. In theory. Okay. Well, it's going to be what it is, I suppose. This is just being difficult. Okay, let's see what we can figure out here. It's a good thing that needs to melt in the pan a little bit, hey? Okay, I think we've got it this time, almost, pretty close. If it isn't absolutely perfect, it isn't going to do anything horrible, terrible. Okay, that is close enough. We have the sides on, we have the bottom on. We will just readjust it a little bit when we go to put our batter in. Okay, now we are going to give this a stir. We've got our butter in there. We want to make sure this is all getting incorporated and it's getting all melty and ooey and gooey. And it definitely is. You can see how nicely that's come together with the butter. Okay, so we are going to add our whipping cream. So we have 50 grams of, turn that down one. 50 grams of whipping cream, and I'm just going to grab a little spatula here. You know, that's the thing when you're using little tiny amounts. If you're measuring it right into the bowl, it's not a big deal, but when a recipe calls for 50 grams and you end up leaving 4 or 5 of those grams, that's 10% of what you needed. So it could have a pretty serious effect on your sauce or recipe, whatever it is you're doing. Okay, now, I am sad to say that while we are doing this together today, there's a very likely possibility that the one that I have in the oven right now is not going to be done. So, okay, 2 egg yolks at a time. We need 6 egg yolks in here. And once you get them whisked in, you can add a couple more. And you get them whisked in. And you add a couple more. And again, we are going to scrape this out with our little spatula. It isn't a big deal if your egg yolks don't break, but it also is not a big deal if your egg yolks break. You just need to scrape your container out. Okay, now the 6 egg yolks that are in there are all incorporated. 1 tablespoon of lemon or lime juice, whatever you have handy, and half a teaspoon of vanilla. Please do not buy artificial vanilla extract. That is not good stuff. It is not keto friendly. Heaven only knows what it has in it. Okay, now we're going to leave this sitting here doing its thing for a minute, and while it's doing that, to our 70 grams of powdered erythritol, we are going to add 2 teaspoons of gingerbread. And I just did that backwards. Now I have 70 grams of powdered erythritol for our sauce on the stove. I also have 70 grams that are going into our egg whites. And we're going to save that for the egg whites because we're not going to take a chance on it clumping in here. And it's a little harder. Now I'm adding the 70 grams of, there we go, 70 grams of powdered erythritol. And powdered only because I really want this to melt in here and incorporate into this sauce. Now this is still going to be a few minutes, a couple minutes for sure, until it's ready to go. So, have you noticed I don't have my production crew here with me today? Okay, what we are going to do in the meantime and in between time, if you're from Alberta, do you know who used to say that? Well, that is something that I heard for years when I was a kid. And if you lived in Alberta in the 70s, you likely did too. Okay, now you need to have your mixer. Hand mixer, stand mixer, doesn't really much matter. And we are going to, I know I keep making noise when I'm with you. Now, we did this on Wednesday as well. I know I was bugging you on Wednesday. We're going to get this on high. I'm keeping it as far away from the mic as I can, so Hopefully you can still hear me. I'll raise my voice a little bit. Hopefully you can still hear. I'm adding 1/4 of a teaspoon of cream of tartar. Now the cream of tartar helps the egg whites hold their shape. And that's important because we need to keep as much air in here as we can. Now, if you have an assistant, you can have them whisking while you're beating. I think we're going to turn this off. It's going to stay over the hot water, so it's not going to start firming up on us. And while that is happening, I should have done this first, I think. So we need the gingerbread spice, TSL Organics gingerbread spice. This is the newest one in the lineup, and it is really yummy. If you like making gingerbread houses or gingerbread anything, ginger snaps, or a gingerbread cheesecake. Now, did you notice in the description it said that it's French and Japanese, and well, it is a souffle cheesecake, and if it's souffle, that makes it French. If it's cheesecake, that makes it French. But the original recipe was actually a Japanese cheesecake that did have flour in it, but we fixed that. And it was called either a Japanese cheesecake or a cotton cake. Now ours isn't going to have quite the same consistency. Alright, 1 second. Check this out. This is whipping up nicely. Okay. We almost have all of the noise done with. Now, the last thing that we're doing here is we are finishing off this meringue that we're doing because we need to incorporate it into the first part. Now, I could have had this pre-done before you got here, but I wanted you to see the sweetener go in and the cream of tartar go in, and yes, I could have told you, but this way, get to see exactly what I'm putting in here. I don't know. Let me know. Would you rather that I tell you about it or show it to you? Now this takes a couple of minutes to get done, but it is worth the wait, worth the time, because this is going to be delicious afterwards. Okay, now when you are a double boiler or a hot water bath, make sure that you are using a tin bowl. Glass doesn't work as well. Okay, now we're starting to get where we want. You can see that this is starting to hold its shape a little bit. Okay. Quite yet. We're getting there. Now this is a labor-intensive project. I promise you it is. Well, not really labor-intensive. It's more time-intensive. Okay, and noise and noise and noise and more noise. I know, I'm sorry. Okay, now we can see that it is holding its shape, mostly. Oh, we're going to do this a little bit more. It really is important that this is holding its shape as much as possible. And it's so close, and if you don't take it where it needs to be, your cheesecake isn't going to turn out. And you can see that the peaks and little mounds in here are still really shiny, and that's what we want. Sorry for all the noise, but oh my goodness, this is going to be worth it. Now, I'll tell you, if you can do this yourself with a whisk, it's definitely good exercise. I cannot do it with a whisk because I have a torn rotator cuff. Who knew? Old injury, but okay, now, did you notice that I was nice to you? I used a silicone whisk. Now, we're going to add 1/3 of our meringue in here, and we are going to fold this. Do not stir it, fold it. Because all of the beautiful air bubbles that we've trapped between the protein fibers in this meringue, we don't want them to get damaged. Now, you don't need to use a whisk for this. If you want to fold it with a spoon, you can do that too. And once it's pretty much incorporated in, you add another 1/3. And we'll get that in there. Because I just cannot help myself, I have to make a little bit of noise. Okay. That is marvelous. So, I called it a cheesecake, and we definitely have put in cheese. 3 different kinds to be exact. But it is not your typical cheesecake. It also is way more keto than your typical cheesecake would be. So, it's going to have a beautiful jiggly kind of jello-y, yummy flavor. If you want to see what a Japanese cotton cake or Japanese cheesecake is all about, you can definitely look it up on YouTube or wherever. There are lots of recipes for pretty much everything. And, you know, I have people ask me often, can you just give me a meal plan for a week? I could, but that's not how I operate. Okay, so I'm adding the last bit into here. Now, just so you guys know, my oven is preheated to 302 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, usually when you make a cake like this, a cheesecake like this, you start it out at about 350 or 360 and then you turn it down. Well, it turns out, according to someone that has done this once or twice, and that would not be me, by the way, 302 degrees, if you can be that precise with your oven, 300 if you can't. Most ovens now are digital and you get to punch the numbers in, so you get to be super precise. But, okay, so there you can see now, and I should have been maybe holding this way, but you can see that we have all of the meringue out of the bowl. And we're just going to fold this last bit in. And we're going to do it so gently because we want all of the beautiful air bubbles in here to stay in here. So 302 degrees for 90 minutes. Now, I should have had my first one in the oven by 9 o'clock this morning, and I did not. So, when it is done, I will pop back on live for part 2 of our cheesecake adventure. So you can either watch that when I'm live, I would love that, or, okay, now this is incorporated beautifully. Don't want to waste this cake batter, although I could lick the whisk, I guess. I don't have to share it with anybody else. There's nobody here. Now, you can use TSL gingerbread. You can use TSL pumpkin spice, apple pie spice, whatever you like. And the eggs that we whisked in here into both those were large eggs, and I don't think I told you that. So 6 egg yolks, 6 egg whites, no leftover parts of the eggs, and in the meringue, there was a 1/4 teaspoon. Okay, here we go. There was a 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar and 70 grams of powdered erythritol, as well as 2 teaspoons of TSL Organics gingerbread spice. Now, I chose gingerbread today because Dell is not a fan of pumpkin. I am a fan of pumpkin. My husband, not so much. Okay, we are going to start this one more time. Our cake batter will be just fine sitting there for a moment. Get this in here, get that straight edge right down on the floor of the cake pan. Alexa, stop. Okay. Now that is my timer to tell me that I need to check the one that's in the oven. But before we do that, we're just going to get the batter in here. Now there we go. See, patience is a virtue. Anything worth having is worth working for. What other sayings do we have in North America that would work well for this? Or if you're not in North America, what sayings do you have in your country? Okay. We are adding all of this batter to our 8-inch cake pan. And you can see how beautiful this is. Now this is going to stay in the oven for 90 minutes on 302 degrees. And I am not positive how much difference that 2 degrees is going to make, but I guess we will find out. Now when you get to the 90-minute mark, you are going to, and it's in a hot water bath. So you need a pan that's at least 2 inches deep. And don't fill it right full, because when you set the cake pan down in the hot water bath, there we go. When you set the cake pan down in the hot water bath, you don't want it to overflow in your oven. Now, when you get to that 90-minute mark, oh my goodness, that is just so good, you guys. You are going to open the oven door and you are going to let it do the last 30 minutes in a warm oven as the oven is cooling off. So that's going to continue to cook this a wee bit. Now, I am going to check this one that is in the oven. Now this one was a little bit of a challenge for me. And I am going to say that one is done-ish. Okay, so maybe we can take a look at it. Now I'm going to, pardon me, I'm going to leave the hot water bath in the oven. Okay, we have that one. And I am going to put this one in the hot water bath in the oven. And I'm going to put it on the lower rack, in the lower part of the oven. Okay, now my oven has this awesome safety feature. Whoops. Okay, 302 degrees start. There we go. My oven has this awesome safety feature that is kind of a pain in the backside sometimes, because what it does is when you open the door for too long or too far, it shuts off. So now we are very gently now you can see how wiggly jiggly this is. Now, I knew that I should not have this on the top shelf, and the reason that on mine, I have two compartments in my oven, and the top compartment is it has, you know, the thing that I can't remember right now because I am having a moment. Alrighty. Convection. So it blows the air around. Now I am just going to take a piece of parchment paper and my cloths, and I'm going to turn this out onto the parchment paper. Now if you have a cardboard or now this is hot, so I'm thinking we maybe shouldn't have done that, but it's going to give you an idea. Now you can see that the cake came out beautifully. Our parchment lined pan is still parchment lined. We're just going to set that up there, and we're going to take a look at this. Now you can see, even though we haven't let it sit for the half hour in the oven. Now this one that we just put in the oven, we definitely will be. This one, I am just going to turn over onto a plate. Maybe. We'll see if I can make this happen. Oh my goodness. Well, you know what? We are already past our time. I will make this happen, but I'll maybe wait until you guys are off and running. So before you leave though, let's grab a little knife. Let's grab a knife and take a look at what we have created here. Now know that yours is not going to be quite like this because you are going to follow all of the instructions that I didn't quite have time to follow. Look at how beautiful that is. Now we are just going to turn this piece over. Now if you want to dust this with a little more powdered erythritol or maybe some cocoa, you can absolutely do that. And once you get it on the plate, you do not want to be wasting this. Now, should I be doing this right this second? Absolutely not. It's hot out of the oven. You definitely are supposed to let it cool, but I want to have a bite while I'm here with you today. This is so light and fluffy and delicious, and the tanginess of the cream cheese and the TSL Organics gingerbread spice, along with the souffle type quality of this, it is absolutely lovely. So, if you are trying to figure out what to make for dessert on Halloween, this would be my suggestion to you because this is absolutely delicious. And it is kind of Halloweeny because Hansel and Gretel, they went to the witch's house and it was made out of gingerbread. Probably not gingerbread quite this delicious. I hope all of you have an amazing Friday and an amazing weekend. Join me here Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Mountain, and we will be doing something Halloweeny. You don't want to miss it. I will see you on Sunday morning at 10 a.m.